Kia ora, Kiwi Codge here, and welcome to episode 76, Te Pehi's final Foray. This episode will be in two sections. The first is the story as described by the Reverend James West Stack in his book Kaiapohia, The Story of a Siege. Second part is a discussion about other evidence that throws areas of Stack's account into question. Now, Stack says that most of his information comes from Peter Tahori. Here is a photo of Stack's wife, Elizabeth, and family. This photo was taken around 1868, outside the church at Tuahiwi, near Kaiapohia. Peter Tahori is here. He looks in his late 50s, so in 1830, would have been in his late teens, early 20s. Peter was possibly at the siege of Kaiapohia. Whether he was there when Te Pehi visited Kaiapohia is uncertain. Unfortunately, the amount of information regarding Peter on the internet is rather limited. Let's now turn to Stack's version as written in his book. Te Rauparaha's force leaves Kapiti in late 1829. They devastate the upper portion of the South Island, and in April 1830 they head south and attack Ōmihi, killing many and taking the survivors captive. Stack puts the force that took Ōmihi at 700. Ngāti Toa spend 10 days at Ōmihi, after which Te Rauparaha sends 2/3 of his force back to Kapiti, together with the uneaten captives. The remaining force heads south to Kaiapohia. That's a force of around 250 warriors and a smaller number of slaves. This effectively leaves Makura empty. The canoes reach the beach at Waipara River, 100 kilometres south, then drag their canoes above the high water mark. This probably only takes a day. Most likely they overnight there. At dawn they begin the 20-kilometre walk to Kaiapohia and begin setting up camp in the afternoon, approximately 200 metres southwest of the pa. The arrival of this small army of well-armed men causes consternation within Kaiapohia. Certainly, no one at the pa should have been surprised. Reports of Te Rauparaha marauding in the top part of the South Island has been reaching them for weeks. Still, the reality of Te Rauparaha being on their doorstep is unsettling. Te Mai Haranui, the ariki for the Kaiapohians, seeks the assistance of Hakitara, a Ngāpuhi, who happens to be temporarily resident at Kaiapohia. A party of chiefs and escort leave the pa and visit the camp of Te Rauparaha. Te Rauparaha says they come in peace, and their main purpose is the trading for Pounamu. It's the more worldly-wise Hakitara that senses the double meaning in many of Te Rauparaha's statements. He quietly advises Te Mai Haranui he's in danger and to return to the pa. Te Mai Haranui's party excuse themselves and return, leaving Hakitara to socialise in the Ngāti Toa camp. His main purpose, to talk with the slaves whom he hopes will be more open with the truth. That evening, a group of Ngāti Toa, led by Te Rauparaha, discuss what action to take against the pa. It's overheard by Hakitara, who is feigning sleep in one of the nearby Foray. In the dark hours of the morning, Hakitara steals back to the pa, shares his information with Te Mai Haranui. A meeting of Ngāi Tahu chiefs is immediately called. At that meeting, the decision is made to strike first. The plan is to get all the Ngāti Toa chiefs into the pā, split them up, then kill them. As the sun rises over the sand dunes, those in the pā that need to know are readied. A purchasing party of Ngāti Toa, laden with trading muskets, arrive at the Hiakariri gate and are allowed in. For greenstone, they are directed to various forays where owners may be prepared to trade. The plan is unfolding well. Te Rauparaha and Te Rangihaata are not amongst those in the pā. The sun is rising, the mist is lifting, yet still these two chiefs have not entered. The trap has to be closed as Te Pehi has purchased a piece of Pounamu from Korowa's Foray and is dragging it towards the Hiakariri gate. An onlooker, Moi Moi, shouts out to Te Pehi, "What are you doing with my piece of Pounamu?" Te Pehi pauses, and a mutual exchange of insults begin. Meanwhile, at the gate, a Ngāti Toa rangatira, Pounamu, is seeking entry. Rangotara, a Ngāi Tahu rangatira, saunters over to the gate. Rangotara has been informed that his brother was taken captive at Ōmihi and is assigned to Pounamu as a slave. Rangotara says, "Welcome, my younger brother's lord," then requests Te Hapa, the gatekeeper, to allow Pounamu in. As the gate opens and Pounamu stoops to enter, Rangotara buries his miti into the back of his head, killing him instantly. Te Pehi, standing only a few metres away, looks in horror, immediately knows he's in mortal danger, abandons the Pounamu and sprints for the opening to the footbridge. The conspirators are ready, and Te Pehi is shot and clubbed to death before getting too far. The sound of the gunfire alerts the rest of the pā. The other Ngāti Toa chiefs in the pā, initially confused, quickly realise what's happening. They try to escape. It's too late. The trap has been well prepared. All within are killed. Te Rauparaha hears the shooting and ruckus coming from the pā. Everyone is to arms. As the noise from the pā subsides and no one who entered returns, he makes the correct assumption that all within are dead. He's astounded that Ngāi Tahu have struck the first blow. It has taken him completely by surprise. For one so cunning, it shouldn't have been so. He's underestimated Te Mai Haranui and Ngāi Tahu. He shan't do that again. He assesses his situation. His force is outnumbered, not necessarily outgunned. His camp is not fortified. His situation is precarious. He's not come under attack. Is it only a matter of time? He makes the decision to immediately decamp and force march back to Waipara to his canoes. This is a huge blow for Ngāti Toa and Te Rauparaha. His vengeance is in the future, not now. Stack's account of Te Pehi's killing finishes here. He names 7 Ngāti Toa rangatira killed that morning. Other accounts tell of the preparing, cooking and eating of the bodies, the dispatching of morsels to other iwi in Pounamu, the making of bones into fishhooks, and the usual degradation shown to an enemy's body. All these accounts and rumours add to the take that Te Rauparaha uses for his actions over the next few years. And so, at the age of around 35, Te Pehi, the great Ngāti Toa rangatira, who aided Te Rauparaha with Ngāti Toa's forced migration from Kaiapohia, who'd been involved in most of Te Rauparaha's campaigns, who had captured Kapiti, who had lost 4 daughters killed at Paikakariki, who had recently returned from England where he met the king, is dead. He is survived by his wives and teenage son, Te Heko, who has the responsibility for seeking vengeance. Okay, let's look at the other accounts and how they vary or throw into doubt the account by Stack. We have the diary of Wersa Hebeli. He says that on the 10th of May 1830, Te Rauparaha's force of around 2,000, including females and children, together with around 500 prisoners, arrived back at Te Awa Iti in 60 to 70 canoes. Te Awa Iti is where Jackie Guard has his whaling operation. Hebeli says that Ngāti Toa stay at Te Awa Iti for about 9 days, so he has significant time to estimate the numbers he quotes. Assuming Hebeli is correct, then Stack's account of 700 Ngāti Toa and allies being at Ōmihi and then 2/3 returning back to Kapiti doesn't fit with Hebeli's observations. In Emma Toromeki's account of the fall of Ōmihi, she witnesses the departure of a canoe for Kaiapohia on the day after the fall of Ōmihi. There were 6 in the canoe, and the party was led by Te Pehi. This number of 6 seems too small to handle the sort of canoe needed to make the 120-kilometre journey to Kaiapohia. Perhaps we were slaves as well, too lowly to be mentioned. Or maybe it was a smaller canoe. There's a different account of Te Pehi meeting Te Maiharanui when a ship that Te Pehi is working on calls into Takapuneke near Akaroa and gives Te Maiharanui a lift up the coast of the South Island where Te Maiharanui gets dropped off. Te Maiharanui extends an invitation to Te Pehi to visit one day. Was this canoe of 6 part of a plan to reconnoitre the pa under the pretext of this invitation? Now, the people of Ōmihi are very close kin to those at Kaiapohia, as we see from Emma's account. Now, I'm no expert of ancient Ngaitahu tikanga, but I'm positive that the fall of Ōmihi would have resulted in those at Kaiapohia seeking utu as soon as possible. Did the canoe of 6 leave the next day after the fall of Ōmihi in order to do their visit to Kaiapohia before the news of the fall of Ōmihi reached Kaiapohia? Stack's account of Te Pehi's killing has it occurring around 12 days after the fall of Ōmihi, and it's apparent in his account that Kaiapohians knew of the fall of Ōmihi, and in quite detail, as by Rangotara's words about his younger brother being assigned to Pokaitara as a slave. Let's read what Emma Toromeki says occurred after the fall of Ōmihi. During Emma's detention, Te Rauparaha dispatched 6 of the Ngāti Toa warriors belonging to Kapiti Island to Kaiapohia for the purpose of reconnoitring, evidently intending to attack that stronghold when a favourable opportunity presented itself. The Kaiapohia people, however, were on the alert, and surprising the scouts, killed Pehi and some others. the rest escaping back to Makura, where Te Rauparaha was awaiting the report of their observations. Enraged by the loss of his men and the failure of their mission, Te Rauparaha caused some of the slaves to be slain. In the meantime, the Kaiapohia natives had assembled to chase the scouts and attack Te Rauparaha at Makura. On their approach, the Ngāti Toa and their allies drew off in their canoes, taking the slaves with them. Emma does not actually witness this fleet from Kaiapohia arriving at Makura, as she has made her escape and is hiding out in the bush. She doesn't mention any battle between the arriving and departing fleets, which I find interesting. Perhaps the Ngāti Toa force of 2,000 warriors and 60 to 70 canoes made the Kaiapohia force, whose size we don't know, err on the side of caution. Of course, it's completely possible that Ngāi Tahu's force came overland, which is probably a better explanation. Now, the historical record has tended to go with Stack's version and gives little credence to Emma Toromeki's version. I'm inclined to go the other way. Emma's version is simpler and makes more sense, and is far more in keeping with Māori tikanga than Stack's. My feeling on what happened is that Te Rauparaha never went down to Kaiapohia, that he dispatched a small reconnaissance team south under Te Pehi, that word reached Kaiapohia of Ōmihi's destruction prior to Te Pehi arriving. After all, you'd surmise that at Ōmihi there must have been a number of canoes out fishing when Te Rauparaha's attack in the late afternoon occurred. It would have only taken one to head south to spread the word. Those at Kaiapohia, knowing of Ōmihi, would have been on high alert, as Emma says, and Te Pehi simply walked into their wrath and utu. The actual details of what this trap was and how some were able to escape isn't stated. In the end, who knows what really happened? But the only thing that everyone agrees on is that Te Pehi met his death at Kaiapohia. It was indeed Te Pehi's final foray. Well, folks, that brings me to the end of this episode. My references for Emma Turumeki, Stack and Hebeli are below. Have a read and let me know what you think. I hope to cover the Elizabeth incident next, which has its genesis in Te Pehi's killing. So join me then. But until then, hei kona, take it easy.